ahead and record, Kim. Thank you.
All right, everyone. Welcome to the first in a two-part series. Tonight is going to be Neptune retrograde in Pisces. Wednesday evening, we're going to be looking at Chiron retrograde in Pisces. You can see Neptune's retrograde June 12th through November 18th, 2015. From 9:49 Pisces back to 7 Pisces 1 minute. Before we get started with material for class, though, a few housekeeping slides. Thank you for letting me run through these quickly. Here at EAN, you can study with us in a variety of different ways. You can listen to our free weekly audio podcasts. You can subscribe to have them show up in your browser as well whenever we post them. You can subscribe to the Astro Library by sections. You can enroll in our multimedia course by segments. Here's a little bit of information on our Astro Library. You can subscribe 1 month, 6 months, 12 months, or do a monthly recurring that you can cancel at any time. You can do it for any of the 3 sections you see here, or you can do it for all 3 sections at once. This Astro Library contains over a dozen years of classes and workshops and webinars by myself and other evolutionary astrologers, and we add material there all the time as we cycle classes through there. Here's our multimedia course. You can see the 3 segments on the screen. You can subscribe to our course segments by getting the actual materials that you see up here on your screen, the binder, the DVDs that also come in a binder. You can also subscribe with segments 1 and 2 completely online. Everything that you see behind you in this screen that was in binders has now been online for both of these segments. And if you are not a registered student with us, I forgot about this slide. Segments 1 and 2 include free monthly webinar classes such as these that we do once a month for each segment 1 and 2. And we currently have all of our course formats, both the live materials and the online only, on sale through June 24th. You can go to evolutionaryastrology.net and you can look, I think, at multimedia materials. Is that the drop-down menu, Leroy?
It's the multimedia courses drop down. It's just right on that top line there on the home page. It's not a drop down menu. It goes right to that page. And of course, we're doing the best job we can keeping up with all this Uranus and Aries technology flow. So there are multiple formats that you can choose. I will let you know that the digital-only format is readable PDFs only. All the course materials on read-only PDFs. You can download those PDFs to your computer. You will not be able to copy or print that material. You will be able to read it on any internet-friendly device. Okay? The videos are already in the segment 1 students area, as well as 280 additional hours of segment 1 student archives, all usually in descending order. Well, it will be in descending order. In other words, the most recent segment 1 webinar first, and then on down through the list through 280 hours, or nearly 8, 9, 10 years of information. So tremendous value, save money now. And of course, you can choose to get DVDs and materials shipped to your home address. You can also choose the digital and DVD option, get the material both ways. So everybody has their own unique preferences in this digital age now as we're moving away from a lot of DVDs to streaming video. Just know that we're trying to maintain the flexibility of different formats. Any questions, just call 605-348-5111 or MediaMonk@evolutionaryastrology.net.
Thank you, Leroy. The only thing I have to update to that is I am approaching 11 years of teaching monthly classes for segment 1, and we're now into the 2nd year on the segment 2 webinars. And so here's our material subject matter again tonight, Neptune retrograde in Pisces. And let's just start out right now with the dates that are going to be important to you. February 19th, Neptune entered its shadow point, which is 7 degrees Pisces, which is where it's going to go stationary retrograde on November 18th. The conjunction of Sun to Neptune, February 25th, 7:16 Pisces. Here's the Neptune retrograde, which we just had last week, June 12th, 9:49 Pisces. Highlight of the retrograde cycle, the Sun's opposition to Neptune retrograde, August 31st, 8.5 Pisces. Neptune direct, November 18th, 7 Pisces again. And the next Sun-Neptune conjunctions, those is like the new moon phase. This is like a full moon phase when you look at the conjunctions to the oppositions of Sun to outer planets. And then, of course, Neptune will leave shadow, the spot where it first went retrograde, on February 8th of 2016. Now, one of the interesting things to note when you're looking at Neptune and Pluto retrogrades is sometimes you can have them make aspects to your chart, not just 3 times, but 5 times. They'll go through 2 retrograde cycles and make 5 aspects to your chart. Well, here's how many times Neptune is going to cross over the stationary retrograde point that it just reached last week on June 12th. It's going to go through its retrograde. It's going to go direct. It's going to cross over that point again, March 8th. That's where it leaves the shadow. But in its next retrograde cycle next year, it's going to hit that point 2 more times. So if you have any planets and the mutable signs, Gemini, Virgo, Sag, Pisces, anywhere between 7, 8 to 11, 12, 13 degrees. This is going to be significant to you. It's going to be with an orb. Neptune's doing the same thing on the point where it's going to go direct in November. In other words, last year's retrograde cycle touched that point direct, then it touched it retrograde. And again, here's February 19th where we started the shadow. Now this is almost always going to be the case with the Neptune retrogrades. The stationary retrograde, the stationary direct point. Neptune travels over that more than once. So again, if you have planets within a few degrees of the mutable signs, or even on the 30-degree dial, meaning doesn't matter what sign of the zodiac it is, but you have planets 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 degrees, Neptune's going to be making an aspect to that planet on the 30-degree dial. It might be an inconjunct. It might be a semi-sextile, so you might want to make note of this. That Neptune is a lot more active than what we think it is in regards to those 2 points where it really slows down in the sky. Here's a visual for you. Here's the Sun. Here's planet Earth. Of course, Neptune, since 2006, is the furthermost quote-unquote planet in the solar system. And as you can see, as Earth closer to the Sun goes faster in its orbit, it will make Neptune appear as though it is stopping stationary retrograde, going backwards, opposition to the Sun, going direct, and then moving forward in the night sky, making those 3 passages in the chart. Here's a little Neptune astronomy for you. We typically say that the revolution around the Sun and around the zodiac is about 165 years. You average that out. The mean motion would be 24 minutes in a day, not a degree, 24 seconds. Not a degree, not a minute, but seconds. Now, we're not talking time here. We're talking space revolving around 360 degrees of the circle. Neptune's retrograde cycle, 5 months annually. 43% of the year, Neptune is retrograde. The retrograde period is 157 days. When Neptune turns stationary retrograde, it appears to stand still for 7 days. When it turns stationary direct, it appears to stand still for 7 days. A little more astronomy. Neptune was discovered September 23rd, 24th in 1846 at the Berlin Observatory. And as I said before, since 2006, it was the farthest planet from the Sun in our solar system. 06 was when Pluto got demoted. It is the 4th largest planet by diameter, the third largest by mass, and it's considered to be one of the four gas giants along with Jupiter, Saturn, and Uranus. So far, there have been 14 moons discovered on Neptune, and they expect to find more. Now, for those of you who are aware of this, Neptune has an elliptical orbit. It will go outside Pluto's orbit during its transit around the zodiac. Well, let me back that up. That's wrong. Pluto has the elliptical orbit, and Pluto will appear to go inside Neptune's orbit. Neptune is a little more circular than Pluto. Pluto's the one with the wide orbit. So Neptune ends up outside of Pluto's orbit in their 500-year cycle as a planetary pair. The last time this happened, Neptune was inside Pluto's orbit, February 7th, 1979 through February 11th, 1999. And during that time, Neptune moved from 1920 degrees Sag to 2.5 degrees Aquarius. Again, this happens once every 500 years. Now, here's a chart for Neptune's discovery back in 1846. Nobody knows the exact time. I don't remember who did it. I just made a 0-degree Aries chart. You can see where Neptune was discovered about 26 degrees Aries. And Neptune had its first return to that point since its discovery back on July 12, 2011. So I thought I'd just put that little tidbit in there for you. Not going to go over the chart in too much detail here. But here's another interesting tidbit in case you didn't know this. Galileo actually made 2 observations of Neptune in the sky, but he thought it was a fixed star. So Galileo actually saw Neptune back in December 28th of 1612, early in the morning. And Neptune at that point was having Jupiter make a balsamic conjunction to it, and Neptune was stationary retrograde, just getting ready to reverse back in its cycle. This would be an interesting to observe. Again, we won't go into a lot of detail, but what you know of that archetype of Neptune and the process of transcendence, or our personal and collective path to know source energy again. This is interesting. You know, the trouble Galileo got in with the Catholic Church, the early Catholic Church had to recant that the earth revolved around the sun, if I'm remembering this correctly. Here's Neptune and Virgo, opposite Pisces, being very critical and very stuck in having to have its details as absolute in the world of religion. Thought that was just kind of interesting for you. A little bit on Neptune mythology. Neptune is known as the Roman god of the sea. He was also, many call him a he, was known as Poseidon in Greek. Now, there was the festival of Neptune called Neptunalia that was observed every year on July 23rd. Those of you who want to still worship or observe pagan ceremonies, there are those in Europe who will still observe this every summer. And the history suggests that we probably worshipped Neptune as a source for water, because if you go back to Rome and Greece in July, this was the middle of the summer heat. Neptune was also the brother of Jupiter and Pluto. Neptune ruled again the realms of heaven, or the water. Jupiter was the earthly world, and Pluto was the underworld. And Neptune's consort, the goddess of salt water, was Salacia. Don't ask me how to pronounce that. What I'm showing you in the background here is here's Neptune with its water staff. Now, what I wanted to do tonight is move into a little bit of collective information about Neptune, and then we're going to end with the personal on the Neptune retrograde. So I thought I'd just look up just a few tidbits for you on some of the last times Neptune was in Pisces, and I went back 3 cycles. Neptune was in Pisces 1520 to 1534. Probably the biggest thing that came during that time period was what we know as the Reformation, where the Protestants, I hope I have that spelled right, where the Protestants broke free from the Catholics. And so in 1522, Martin Luther, the origin of Lutherans, Martin Luther translated the New Testament into English. Before that, it was Latin, and only those who could read Latin could read the New Testament. And over the next 40 years, all the way through that Neptune in Pisces, over 100,000 copies of the New Testament were printed in English so that people could read the Bible for themselves. This was the early introductions to the Puritan movement as well. Another little tidbit for you, hops. The plant hops, which grows as a vine every year, and it can, big vine. It was introduced to England in 1525, and hops is one of the most well-known plants for making beer. You can see the Reformation caught hold in Sweden and Scotland. You can see where the Lutherans in Germany really started to protest against the Catholics toward the end of this Neptune in Pisces. And so, this makes sense. Every time Neptune finishes up a cycle in its own sign, Pisces, we're going to have some disillusionment, some dissolving around our belief systems on the deepest levels. Something about religion and spirituality is not going to work anymore. And Neptune, with its relationship to addictions and drugs, here's hops coming to England. Now the next cycle was 1684 to 1697 when Neptune was next in Pisces. Looky here, the Salem witch trials in the U.S. came 1692, 1693. There is a theory that some of these witch trial origins were the grains having a fungus on them that if you ate the grains would just put you on a pretty bad trip, let's say. And so there is one of those theories that that's really what the origin of the witch trials were. It wasn't women going crazy. It wasn't women trying to do, sorcery. They got a hold of a bad fungus and had a bad trip with the drug on the fungus, the results of that. It could also have been that there were those that were holding out as the natural herbologist. But isn't it interesting that the witch trials were during Neptune in Pisces? We also had the first creation of national debt in England with Neptune in Pisces, and the Bank of England was created in 1694. I'll say more on that here in a few more charts. And I also just thought it was interesting to just include these other tidbits. We created property insurance with Neptune in Pisces, and we had the Spanish destroy the last remains of the Mayans and their worshiping and their spiritual practices down in Central America. Now, the last Neptune in Pisces cycle prior to this one here was in 1847 to 1861. We had the California Gold Rush. The term spiritualism and the practice of spiritualism was popularized in the United States in the late 1840s. In other words, there were those who started breaking free from the Protestant religions one cycle later, or 2 cycles later, I guess that would be. There were several interesting books published. Nathaniel Hawthorne, The Scarlet Letter, remember the adulterer and all of the judgments around that? Judgment being a Pisces Virgo word. Harriet Beecher Stowe published Uncle Tom's Cabin, showing us the racism that was taking place in the U.S. with blacks as slaves. We saw the earliest use of the word evolution in 1852. Now that's a tidbit for evolutionary astrologers to remember. Chloroform drug was first used as an anesthetic. It was used by Queen Victoria with the birth of one of her many children. Thoreau published on Walden's Pond. We had the start of the Republican Party with Neptune in Pisces. That'll be interesting. I did not have time. I didn't look up a date for this, but it looks about halfway through the cycle, so we're going to be looking at Neptune in about mid-degrees Pisces. Isn't it a little bit interesting that, as of today, June 15th, there are now, 11 or 12 Republican candidates for U.S. president? And so here's the Republican Party going through the midst of its first Neptunian return. And what do they believe? What's their ideologies? What is their party platform? Stay tuned for more of this. Like I said, I didn't have time to look up a date for a chart on them. There's something for any of you who are interested in any politics. We had a gentleman called Herbert Spencer publish Principles of Psychology. I thought that was an interesting tidbit for us to recognize that here we are with Neptune going into some of the deepest understandings of the mind. Another drug detail. Cocaine was first extracted from the cocoa beans. Sigmund Freud has Neptune in Pisces. The German physicist Max Planck has Neptune in Pisces. And we had Charles Darwin publish on the origin of species by natural selection. Here's that evolution again. We also had the first oil well drilled in Pennsylvania. And then, of course, we know that we led up to the Civil War all the way through Neptune and Pisces. The other thing going on, it was in 1850. We had a Uranus-Pluto conjunction, 3 of them at 29-30 degrees Aries. Here's when the Civil War started, April 12, 1861. The next day, Neptune entered Aries. A couple more things moving into this current cycle. Just stop for a moment and reflect then on these last 3 cycles. Climate change. Nature in all of its rawness. I think as we move through Neptune in Pisces, we're really going to see the masses have some recognition and acceptance of the fact that we humans have an interaction with all other species on planet Earth, including Gaia, which is planet Earth itself. Look at the water events we've been having, for instance, in the United States, from droughts to floods. We just had a flood over in the country of Georgia in Europe, wiped out a town. All the zoo animals got out, and they had to resort to putting down a lot of them because they just couldn't catch them. Look at how oil spills and the whole issue of drilling through the method of fracking is making the headlines. For those of you who don't know this, the state of North Dakota, where there is a lot of oil drilling going on and a lot of fracking. North Dakota and South Dakota are twins. North Dakota, South Dakota have a Neptune-Pluto conjunction in early degrees Gemini. So the last Neptune-Pluto conjunction was in the 1890s. And so there are those that feel Pluto rules oil. There are those that feel Neptune. I kind of tend towards Neptune being the ruler, but I can see where it could be both. Of course, we don't have to look far to see the religious fundamentalism that's going on, starting when Pluto was in Sagittarius, which was 1995 through 2008. Pluto, Neptune into Pisces picked it up, And what we're going to see as we go through, and especially as we now go through the Neptune retrogrades in Virgo, where it asks us to reach for a level of discernment. We're going to have masses attracted to these extremes. This is the Islamic State we see going over there in the Middle East. We're also going to have the masses that are repelled by all of this and start recognizing some of the interconnectedness that we have between all of the different religions on planet Earth. So I think we're going to see an increasing awareness of the mind-body connection. And with Virgo being the polarity of Neptune, when it's retrograde in Pisces, it points towards Virgo. And it's pointing towards that body, towards that diet, exercise, and rest. Now, I think when Neptune was in Aquarius during that transit, and I don't remember where it started, I want to say in the late 90s, I think. Oh, wait a minute, what am I doing? I can tell you this. Neptune moved in Aquarius 1998 through 2011. And that's when we really saw the whole topic of quantum physics, E equals mc squared. We do not destroy energy, we just change its form. I think that is going to continue to expand through Neptune in Pisces. We also look at Pope Francis really being pretty much on sometimes the leading edge of Catholicism. Here's a Pope catching up with the masses through Neptune and Pisces. And here is the first Pope Francis taking on the symbolic name of the saint who is the guardian saint of the animals and the plants as well, and the poor. So here we are seeing one of those evolutions in Neptune through Pisces. Now, when it goes, anytime it goes retrograde in Virgo, expect the Catholic Church to come under fire. There have been some more popes that have been in the news recently as it's Neptune's went retrograde here in the last week in regards to all of the sexual scandals again. You could see Pope Francis coming under some fire. There are those who are trying to preempt him, if that's the correct word. He's going to come out, and I don't remember what the Catholics call it, but he's going to come out with a new document on evolution and nature. And I didn't know this. I was reading this tidbit in the last week, that Catholicism doesn't reject evolution like the evangelical religions do. So go back 3 cycles to the 1500s, and we had Luther starting the Protestant movement and rebelling against Catholicism. And now we have those evangelical religions that came through Protestant and Puritanism. They're now coming pretty extreme. We had a bunch of family in town here last weekend. We went and toured the Mammoth site in southern Black Hills. It's a world-class archaeological paleontological site, 26,000-year-old mammoth bones. And one of my mom's nephews in his 70s was just pretty uptight about the tour. How can they prove that? Who says the earth is that old? You know, the evangelicalism that the earth is no more than 4,000 years old or something like that. And so Catholicism really doesn't see a denial of evolution. It just feels, thinks, believes, ponders, promotes that the supreme intelligence, source energy, created it all. And the whole 7 days could be a parable. So that was interesting. So watch how different belief systems are evolving through this Neptune and Pisces cycle. And then whenever there's a retrograde in Virgo, we're going to have scandals exposed. We're going to have discourse or argumentativeness, criticizing this, criticizing that, the Virgo. Something could give way and evolve into discerning, Virgo, a new understanding. Stay tuned. We will watch for that. I'd like to move on to another. I never thought of this with Neptune and Pisces, but it was really hitting me as I was doing some of my prepping in this last day. Remember I said in 1694 the Bank of England's charter was created? The Bank of England has Neptune retrograde natally at 24 degrees Pisces, 5 minutes. You see that at the bottom of their chart. And if you following consensus news in the U.S., what's really going on right now? The TPP and the TTIP, this Trans-Pacific Partnership, and then to expand that between the Pacific and the Atlantic, trying to fast track it. President Obama, the Democratic president, is for it. The Republicans are for it. And his own party, the Democrats, have been standing up for it. Basically, it's coming down to a grassroots movement of the masses waking up and going, wait a minute, this is going to hurt jobs. Well, this TISA, Trade and Services Agreement, is tucked into these. And it basically would try to stop and prevent any more public banking. And any of you who've heard me over the last 5 years know that since Pluto went into Capricorn, I've really become an advocate of public banking as a utility and a service, not a for rich, for the bankers situation. Well, this TISA would cover 51 countries, everything except the BRICS. If you want more details on this, you can go to section 3 of the Astro Library and see my 2013 lectures with Robert Gover, Money, Past, Present, Time and Money, Past, Present, and Future. And there's a 2-set lecture that you can go get. This is a brand new article by Ellen Brown in her Web of Debt website. How this fast tracking is basically, again, trying to halt the public banking movement that's really taking place on a grassroots level, with the Uranus in Aries waxing squares to Pluto in Capricorn. And here's Neptune in Pisces trying to pull the blinders over on us. Let me give you a couple of quick slides on this, all right? First of all, that Bank of England, the history on that, and here's a picture of the building in the background. King William III was allowed to come to power. William and Mary, if you remember this, they were European transplants to England, distant cousins or distant relatives to, I want to say, King James after Elizabeth I. He was allowed to come to power because he gave the control of the money. He was in debt from wars with Europe. He gave control of the money to the private European bankers. So the Bank of England allowed private banking to create money and loan it to the government to be repaid by the taxpayers with interest. First time this was allowed to happen, 1694, Neptune in Pisces. The BOE created the first permanent federal loan with only the interest repaid, what we would also know as the first national debt. Again, more on that in my other lectures if you need more. BOE also formalized fractional reserve lending. What's that? Early goldsmiths would lend out paper receipts, and they would keep track of the gold and the silver, the actual commodity money. Paper receipts were fiat money, just paper money. It had value because you and I said it does. The dollar bill has value in the U.S. because our federal government says it has value. The goldsmiths would keep the money in their vaults. They'd lend out the paper receipts, and it led to the creation of banks lending out paper receipts, and banks lending more money than they actually kept in reserves or deposits for their customers. And panics, this could be a Neptunian Pisces term, fear, runs on the banks that would collapse the banks when the public would all come in and demand to have their gold and silver back, and the banks didn't have enough reserves. And what the goldsmiths found is they only had to keep about 10% in gold and silver compared to what they lent out. So that meant if you had $100 in gold and silver, you could lend it out 10 more times. You could make some interest off of that. Today, our banks only keep reserves of 3 to 5%. A lot more I could say on this, but I just want you to know fractional reserve banking was formalized with Neptune in Pisces. Now, history is full of examples where the public, citizens and taxpayers, compete with the private, the bankers and the financial elites over control of money and monetary policies. Now, the Rothschilds go all the way back to that Bank of England. Here is the first Rothschilds quote, "Give me control of a nation's money and I care not who makes the laws." So remember that Bank of England, Neptune, natally 24 Pisces. BOE is going to have 3 Neptune returns in 2022-23. There's going to be more to come with this whole battle over banking, and so much of the U.S. history, England's history, so the European Union, the stuff you're seeing happening right now with Greece. There's so much going on with that. I didn't have the chance to compare Neptune and Pisces to Greece's chart. That would be something interesting too if you want to. I know Scott Wolfram over in Germany just did an article on it. Here's the Bank of England's chart for 12 noon, 0 degrees houses. Has a grand cross in the mutable signs with 5 planets here. Now, I did do a little bit of research on what they feel would be the time. This date, July 27th, 1694, is when the Bank of England opened for business. So most people feel that it would have been somewhere in the morning, and playing around with it, I think it's possible that it could be somewhere between 10:45 and 11 a.m. Look at the rising sign. Look at where Uranus is. Look at where Pluto is starting to come. We could see more going on here. The Bank of England made news in March, and you can read this about Ellen Brown's article. It made news in March, not mainstream news, but if you're watching, it made news because it admitted they don't have gold and silver in vaults anymore. They just create accounting entries. When you take a loan out, all the bank does is create an accounting entry in a computer. That's where they get their money. But you pay back that amount you borrow with interest, guarantee the bank's a profit. Now, look at this Bank of England right here. All the Leonian stuff, and if it was in the morning sometime, 10th house Leo, the power. The Bank of England has been behind the scenes quite a bit. It was nationalized in 1946, and then it was privatized again back in 1998. So it is back into the control of the financial elite. And both the Bank of England and the private Federal Reserve for the U.S., they're really under Basel, Switzerland, and the BIS Accords in Basel, Switzerland that have come about over the last decade. So all of those old money financial elites in Europe still control it behind the scenes. If we do have a morning chart somewhere with Libra, 10, 11, whatever, it's going to put this grand cross in mutable signs in the mutable houses. And basically what this is going to be is truth versus lies. A sleight of hand shenanigan, whatever that word is, going on, versus being upfront and honest. You going to pronounce the word for me? I hear Leroy. And so here's the Mars-Neptune opposition. Any of you who hear me with my forecasting podcast, I always look at Mars-Neptune planetary pair as honesty in action. T-squares to Saturn. We're going to have a Saturn return with the BOE. And here is Neptune. I suspect, and this is why I was wondering here, maybe it's 11:15. Uranus could be in control of the money here and doing a sleight of hand as well. You see the public, which is always the moon, is in early Libra, and it is square the node. Who's got control? The authority or the community? And you see how that's set up with this battle with Neptune square the nodes. Who knows? We don't know a time for this chart, but most of the conversations around it go with sometime in the morning because there is records that say they opened for business there. And so just quickly here, remember again, their Neptune, the three Neptune terms with the BOE, Bank of England. Well, the U.S. Pluto has Capricorn 27.5 retrograde. We're going to have our Pluto returns in the U.S. in 2022. Here is the U.S. Gemini chart, July 4th, 1776, 2:13 a.m. You can use the Sibley chart with the Sag rising, 5:04 p.m. You're still going to have that first Pluto return coming along right here. At the time we start to have those Pluto returns in 2022, we are looking at Neptune right here, 22 degrees Pisces, making 5 squares to Mars in Gemini. See that how that fits in with the BOE, with the US chart? Even though we thought we were breaking free, all the US histories with England are over money, okay? Over public versus private control of the who gets to create the money and who gets the interest off of it, the banking elite or the government coffers back to the government. We're also going to have Neptune oppositions going on. Here's the dates for the Neptune squares to Mars and the Neptune oppositions to Neptune. And if you look at this historically, one of the things that Robert Gover, who just crossed over in January of 2015, my 2013 lectures are with him. He wrote Time and Money. Still a great book to get. All the stock market crashes in the U.S. historically have occurred when we have outer planets, especially Neptune, making hard aspects to the Mars-Neptune square. In the U.S. charts, just look at these dates. Now I know I'm looking ahead, but I think you're getting some of the flavor here for the Neptune and Pisces cycles that are going on, and some of the, again, the wool pulled over our eyes, the disillusionment, the dissolving that has to go through, because when governments turn the power to create money over to the financial elites and they loan us the principal, but they don't give us a way to pay it back with interest, it creates an unsustainable Ponzi scheme, meaning we have to have new borrowers to pay back the interest, and we never pay back the original amount. And eventually things like the U.S. debt collapse. We can't pay it back under that system. Another system has to come along and replace it. And part of the grassroots movement, the Cancer polarity to Pluto and Capricorn, is the masses waking up to this. And this is my personal soapbox. I want the masses to realize that we can take that power back, and we can loan ourselves, government can loan us money without interest or low interest. The interest goes back into the government coffers, like the Bank of North Dakota has done since 1919, and we have less taxes because we get our own interest back, and that pays for the infrastructure. Fascinating subject. Do not let yourself feel powerless over the issue of money, Neptune and Pisces. Retrograde polarity, Virgo, educate yourself. I have, again, lots of lectures on this. You can see my March lecture on the Uranus-Pluto waxing squares moving forward. Leroy, do you remember if that lecture has been put in the Astro Library yet? Section 3, do you remember? Perhaps Leroy can check that out for us as we're going on.
Say, which one are you referring to, Kim?
In March of this year, when we had the 7th Uranus waxing square to Pluto,
right?
I did a webinar on that, and I've just wondered if that ended up in section 3 yet.
I'll report back to you.
All right, thanks. All right, time for me to apologize, have a drink of water. All right, that's all I wanted to say from a public perspective. I just had not personally made that key in with Neptune in Pisces and deception and, truth coming out. And so I wanted to share this with you. And what spurred me into this recognition was Ellen Brown's article that came out June 11th, the day before Neptune went retrograde. And when any of those outer unconscious planets turn stationary retrograde and stationary direct, the unconscious is made conscious. We can have a big aha moment around it. So moving on then, well, okay, that's what I wanted to do. Any questions from anybody on how I've just discussed Neptune in Pisces on a collective level before I move on and now kind of work with this on a personal level? And again, collectively, Neptune retrograde in Pisces will point to Virgo, and it's really going to point toward the exposure of all deceptions and lies, the exposure of judgments and conditionings that the collective, whether it's a government or a religion, wants us to conform to. And we have to go over to the Virgo polarity of discerning and putting that analytical mind there and really looking at what is the fact versus the conditioned belief. So moving on, go ahead, Leroy.
Yeah, we don't have anybody on the board raising their hand, so you're clear to go for now.
All right, thank you. So when we look at planetary retrogrades, what are they? They're the principle of psychologically compensating and being out of touch with your own true nature. And almost all of us, regardless of evolutionary state, do have psychological compensations. We are trying to appear normal. We're trying to fit in. Well, those compensations will take place anywhere there's dissatisfaction, anywhere we don't have the courage to be who we really are. And so we look to the status quo of where we're going to be compensating through any planetary archetype, via sign, house, aspects. We add on evolutionary state of the soul, and we add on the environmental conditionings. What's your race? What's your country? What were your parental and culture environmental conditionings like? And so planetary retrogrades, Mercury through Pluto, offer us that opportunity to break free from those compensations and to realign with our own individual nature and natural law. Planetary retrogrades are a geocentric or Earth-centered phenomena. The planets we live in a heliocentric solar system. All planets go around the sun. But here on Earth, geocentric, they appear to slow down, stop, go backwards, slow down, stop, and go forwards again if we observe them. And so when we have a planetary retrograde, it causes a withdrawal from the status quo to again redefine that planetary archetype according to our own individual natural laws. So when a planet is retrograde, it's non-static. There's a review, re-evaluation, all the re-words you hear with retrogrades. In other words, when a planet is retrograde, either for a lifetime natally or by transit for all of us during the transit, that planetary archetype is in a perpetual state of redefinement. It's evolving. Now the sign in the house of the planetary retrograde will describe how it's manifesting. The opposite sign in house will provide clarity, expression, and the direction to go in being able to break free into our own natural expressions. And of course, answers to retrograde lessons always come from within ourselves. Now, natal planet retrograde, it's an individual lesson throughout your entire lifetime. When the planet is retrograde by transit, as we're discussing with Neptune retrograde in Pisces, all of us individually and all of us collectively are going through these lessons of breaking free and redefining that archetype. If you're born with the planet retrograde, say for instance, Neptune is retrograde 5 months of the year. So 43% of us have Neptune retrograde. So when it goes retrograde by transit, there's going to be a temporary harmony and balance. We're going to be in that flow to really break free, bust out of all of the conditioning factors of Neptune. We'll look at these in a minute. If you're born with a natal planet either stationary retrograde or stationary direct, it creates a pretty powerful state. Everything is more intense. The planet is slowed down. It appears to be standing still. If it's standing still to go retrograde, it means it's going to be hard to move that archetype forward because you really got to review things and you really got to throw off all the conditioning from the past, especially the past life conditionings. If the planet is standing still, getting ready to go forward, you've had the review, most recent past lives, and now the universe is demanding that you're going to move this planet archetype forward. You are going to be unique. You are going to individualize in that area. Now, when we start to look at the Neptune archetype in evolutionary astrology, the planet, the sign, and the house are an interchangeable archetype. Some types of astrology like to say the sign is different than the house, and I've come to agree with the teachings of Jeffrey with Green on this. Jeffrey taught this years ago. And as I've looked at EA, observe, correlate over the last 30 years, I really do believe when you try to separate a sign and a house and the planet, you're going to get into astrology gobbledygook. You're going to be trying to complicate something that is really just a simple archetype in consciousness. And with Neptune, Pisces in the 12th house, sometimes EA calls it the collective conscious unconsciousness. So it is conscious, subconscious, unconscious. And what does it represent on that conscious to unconscious level? Our personal and collective search for universal source. What EA will call transcendence. And so as I go through any of these next slides, getting into Neptune in Pisces, just remember when it's retrograde, it means that how we have been trying to transcend, how we have been trying to evolve our relationship to universal source, God, Goddess, Great Spirit, it's something's no longer working. And we have to find a new way when Neptune's retrograde, especially as it's retrograde in its own sign. Oh, I'm skipping ahead of myself. Neptune retrograde, something missing or no longer working in our search for our relationship to universal source. And how it will typically work with Neptune, and especially Neptune in Pisces, is through disillusionment, through letdown. And depression could be another word. And we have to go through that in order to reconnect to source. And part of the reasoning for this, okay, the Neptune Pisces 12th house as an archetype, collective conscious unconsciousness, it's the last of the 12 archetypes in astrology. So it includes all 11 archetypes that came before. This is so phenomenal. It is so important. We don't hear this a lot in astrology. Pisces contains all 11 signs that came before it. That's how big of a circle Pisces holds. 12th house does the same thing. Neptune holds all the other planetary archetypes within its own circle. You can see then how that is becoming the totality of consciousness, the totality of the unconscious, source energy itself. So Neptune then becomes that transcendence. There's more to life than just a physical universe, than just a physical existence. And so Neptune, Pisces 12th house, as an archetype, is there to remove whatever barrier there is in connecting to source. So as Neptune goes retrograde in any sign, any house, and especially in its own sign, it's going to be dissolving wherever we have put up any barrier in our life, in our world, to have a one-on-one relationship to universal source. See how Neptune retrograde in Pisces is just going to naturally expose the conditioning factors in organized religions? Won't do it for all of us at all the time, but there's going to be another wave of it, and another wave of it, another wave of it every year Neptune's retrograde. So then Neptune also, as a collective conscious unconsciousness, also includes past, present, and future. I'll explain more on that for you as well in the next slide, I think it is. And so that collective conscious unconsciousness, it is universal, all of us as a human species. It has sub-layers as racial, sub-layers as national, but Neptune will go beyond that. It'll go beyond the human species. It'll go into non-human, the mineral, vegetative, and animal kingdom. And so when we look at universal source, it is the totality of conscious unconsciousness in all its different forms. Mineral, vegetative, animal, human, angelic, whatever. And so regardless of the Saturnian form, behind that is Neptune. And when Neptune's retrograde, we become sensitized to recognizing all of this and to move into that direction of the interconnectedness with all of this. Now, how Neptune wants to typically work is through cycles of confusion and clarity. And this is Neptune in Pisces as well. And these cycles are unpredictable in their timing, and they are unpredictable in their duration. And so, when we get triggered into a confusion cycle, we find those Neptunian words: alienation, disassociation, disillusionment, meaninglessness, depression on some of the ultimate level. And we go through that because it turns us inward. And Neptune retrograde, again, is going to emphasize this. And the purpose is to dissolve, to remove what is no longer working in our life. So reflect for a moment on where Neptune in Pisces is in your own personal chart. I have the 12 houses at the end of this slideshow, but for a moment, just on a very intuitive level, Neptune in Pisces is in which house? And so just think of what you know about that house and where is it dissolving for you? Where is something being released? Where is something no longer working? And how is it inviting you to reconnect with Source, to align personal will with divine will? And when we do that, then we will flip over into the clarity cycle. We'll find our faith and inspiration again. We'll have this renewal that seems to just come through and energize us. we'll go to those Neptune Pisces 12th house words of bliss, faith. We will have devotion, which will belong both in the Pisces and Virgo spectrum of the zodiac. So the purpose, again, renewing that relationship with the divine. I will, my will, divine will. Now, what happens when Neptune discovers something in our life no longer working or serving a purpose? There's the past. And it's dissolving. It turns us inward until we really ponder it and work to surrender and let it go. It is not immediately replaced with the next thing, which is the future. We are left in the void, which is the present. The reason we're left in the void is so we cannot easily project that past forward. It teaches us to go inward and have that one-on-one connection with the universal source. It teaches us there are no substitutes for God, Goddess, or whatever we perceive our higher power to be. It serves to shift the seat of consciousness from our ego to our soul, and from our individual soul to universal soul. And in that void, we do have to learn that lesson of faith. We have to figure out whether we are going to energize a world of fear or a world of love. A world of cruelty or a world of renewal and hope. And of course, we have to learn that ego in and of itself, our personal will, is not enough to create what we want in our world. If we could, we'd all win the lottery, wouldn't we? And so we have to learn how to align our personal will with divine will. Again, I will, my will, divine will. And when we have to let go of that past, let go of whatever's in our life that's no longer serving us, and that gets emphasized when Neptune goes retrograde. We're in the midst of it right now, and it will be through the next 5 months if we're willing to pay attention to it. It creates a fear of loss. It's very hard to exist in that void. Meditation, walks in nature are good ways of learning to be okay with it. And so that fear of loss, then, the ego wants to fill it up, wants to fill up the void. So it wants to fill it up with another separating desire and another separating desire. And so again, we're left in that void. It's not easy to fill it up with another separating desire, although we can. We can. We're left in that void, though, to really make the connection with Source, to ease the fear of loss. So this is the Neptune archetype. This is emphasized with Neptune in Pisces, and this becomes very emphasized when Neptune goes retrograde. Now I'll speak more to the Virgo polarity here in just a moment, but I'd like to talk about a couple more archetypes with Neptune in Pisces in the 12th house first. Neptune Pisces 12th also rules the dream world, and we have 3 types of dreams. The most popular by far, probably 70 to 80% of our dreams, are what's called junk dreams. This is where we release all the excess mercurial stimuli, the Virgo polarity. How many times do you watch a movie in the evening and that night you go to bed and you dream it? or you have an argument with a coworker and that night you can't get to sleep because you're processing through it, or you dream it. We also have past life dreams. When we come out of a past life dream, Jeffrey would say that they were usually black and white. And I've known people who have past life dreams in Technicolor. What will happen is there's a strong disorientation when we wake up. It takes us a moment to remember that we're in this body, in this lifetime. When we do have a past life dream, there's usually a pretty strong intensity. You remember that dream. Whereas you can be going through your drunk dreams, and while they can have some meaning to you, the moment you get out of bed and you go take the morning bathroom break and you look out the window and you forgot the dream. That's why they talk about dream journals by the bed. And the third type of dream is superconscious dreams. These are visionary dreams, either personal to us or with the world, or even beyond this solar system, galaxy, the human world as we know it. And the purpose of all of these superconscious dreams and all visions is to change our trajectory going forward if we do not like the vision or the dream. If we do like it, carry on. So dreams have a tendency to follow the 28-day lunar cycle. That's the moon Neptune as a planetary pair. And the moon so relative to our sense of ego. Moon rules Cancer 4th house, Neptune rules Pisces 12th house, the emotional link. Dream world, we will also be working through the emotions. How many times do you have a nightmare and it wakes you up and you've got to spend some time processing emotionally? Was it a past life one? Many times it can be the recurring theme of an actual past life event. So if you want to do some charting of your dreams, you chart dreams through the lunar cycle. And I would say Moon Neptune from conjunction to conjunction. And you can also chart your dreams through Neptune retrograde. Because when Neptune is retrograde in any sign, the door is open to the unconsciousness. The psychic sensitivity can come up easier, and especially through Neptune in Pisces. So you may want to have a Neptune retrograde dream journal to see what's happening, and perhaps do some reflection here on just the last week, because Neptune went retrograde June 12th, and we're recording this class June 15th. We're in the middle of Neptune still standing stationary retrograde, just starting to reverse itself. So that veil into the depths is thin. The door's open. Now, of course, Virgo, Pisces, 6th house, 12th house, and rulers Mercury, Neptune relate to the religious distortions of sadomasochism. Coming through the last 2,000 years of the Piscean age, we have the conditioned beliefs in the perfect God and our imperfect humanism. And it creates conditioned guilt because it's easy to see how imperfect we are. When the guilt is linked to atonement, I must suffer, I must amend and atone, it creates victimization and in its extremes, masochism. When the guilt is linked to anger, how dare they, I'm going to get them before they get me, it is linked to victorization and in its extremes, sadism. Sadomasochism stems directly from human-made religions. Now, both polarities can be on both sides of the sadomasochism spectrum. In other words, Virgo and Pisces can both be the sadist, and Virgo and Pisces can both be the masochist. There's not one side of the polarity that's masochistic versus sadistic. both polarities, Virgo, Pisces, 6/12, can be on both sides of the sadomasochism spectrum. What is really needed here when we have sadomasochism, which we all do in one degree or another, the whole key to moving forward out of the sadomasochism is, of course, searching for natural spiritual laws and principles, which Neptune retrograde in Pisces opens us up to, but also self-forgiveness. No one's perfect. And it leads us to that big question, why would something perfect create this mess? We're all here in the process to perfect. And every baby step forward we make, Virgo process, source energy perfects as well. So that self-forgiveness and gentleness is so important in moving out of that cyclical cycle of anger atonement. So again, Neptune in Pisces brings exhaustion of the separating desires. No longer makes us feel good. We created this desire, we achieved that desire, but it no longer is serving to satisfy us. And so we exhaust the separating desires and surrender to universal source. Now, where this is different from Pluto the soul and the dual desire nature, where this is different, where Neptune Pisces 12th house is different from Pluto Scorpio 8th house and the dual desire nature of the soul, is that there's a tendency for the soul, again, for security reasons, to find another separating desire, find another separating desire, and find another separating desire. And if there wasn't such a tendency for that, we could all pray ourselves perfect and have instant nirvana. So Neptune with its voidism, and Neptune with its long retrograde cycle, forces us to surrender to source. The ultimate purpose of Neptune retrograde is to find God, find Goddess, find the great creator, find meaning, find value in life, whatever you want to call it. So Neptune retrograde in Pisces points to the Virgo polarity. So what will we have? We're going to have reality shocks. Leroy and I had another death in the family. And we found out Thursday that my sister's husband's dad was killed in a ranching accident. And we had to travel across the state yesterday for a funeral this morning, and then travel back in time for class. And so it was quite a shock too. My brother-in-law and his sister and their mother, boom, went out to move cattle with the hired hand and was gone. So not every reality shock is death, but we have these shocks that come to just wake us up. And how it can happen many times with the Virgo polarity is we keep running into the crisis and we keep repeating the crises. And if we're caught up in the sadomasochisms, we do get on that hamster wheel of creating that crisis again and again and again. The real purpose of crises is to change. Excuse me.
Gesundheit.
Oh, thank you. I felt it coming on. Oh, hold on just a second.
Through all the family events, Kim's been also suffering from a little bit of a stuffy nose and cold. We're doing a little release on our energetic balancing program, I'm afraid, so I'm trying to cover for her and fill some gaps here as she's collecting herself.
Neptune in Pisces and the immune system and ruling energetic balancing.
Yes.
I think I was exposed to West Nile because I went from being outdoors showing a friend a garden, getting a half a dozen mosquito bites, and an hour later, runny nose, flushing, and I don't get that kind of stuff, especially in the garden. And so I had to pick up on the frequency for West Nile, and I do think that's probably what's been going on, is that I've been flushing it. That was my little crisis, a sneeze. So that Virgo polarity, we become acutely aware of criticism. It's a Virgo word. Virgo, Pisces is the potential for perfection. Virgo is the lack of perfection and the acute awareness of the lack of perfection. And so criticism and crises are Virgo words. And so we start to become aware of that cycle of crises in our life. We become aware of how we have that inner criticism that then reflects into outer criticism with others or with our environment. And so when Neptune's retrograde, we really have an opportunity, especially in Pisces, of being able to change this patterning. And if we're not working to change that pattern, taking care of ourselves, my next slide, what we can really run into is all the avoidance activities, the Piscean drugs, alcohol, all the avoidance activities like TV, reading, just going out and socializing all the time versus cleaning the house like we need to get done. Our young adult with lots of Pisces in his chart had the house to himself for 24 hours, and we're wondering if he got off the living room couch. So we have to be real careful of avoidance activities and excuse making. That belongs in the Virgo realm, but the Virgo Pisces realm together. I'm not good enough. I'm not ready. I need one more class. I need a little more practice. I need a little more Virgo preparation. So these can be some of the distortions that we'll run into. And of course, we can have all the sadomasochism take place as well with the Virgo polarity if we're not making an effort to be aware of the shocks, the crises, the criticisms, if we're not making an effort to be aware of where we're just going through all our procrastinations. So, Virgo lessons, nothing substitutes for diet, exercise, and rest. We have to make the Virgo effort of putting one foot in front of the other with our life. So we have got to really, even when we're in the void and we're so disillusioned and nothing in my life is working, we must make the Virgonian effort. I still have to exercise. Leroy and I we've actually been across the state twice in the last week. We took my little 5-year-old niece home the day after her grandfather passed, and then we came back, and then we turned around and didn't know when the funeral was, so then we had to turn around and go back to the funeral. So here we are riding in the car 5 hours each direction, more or less, and all Leroy and I want to do is just get out of the car and take a walk, which is what we got to do last night. Thank you very much. Which is what we will most likely do when we get off the phone, because nothing clarifies better than putting oxygen in the system. The Pisces, Neptune rules the immune system. Virgo, 6th house rules diet, exercise, and rest. Those can be the catalysts that move us forward when we are going through these Neptune retrogrades. Again, the depression, the disillusionment, nothing like diet, exercise, and rest, meditation, Tai Chi. Those are the things that can bring us a sense of being okay as we're in the void. We also need to make the effort with forgiveness. Virgo needs to realize there is no perfection on planet Earth. Not even Source itself is perfect. So we've really got to work at self-forgiveness, forgiveness of others, and making peace with Source itself. So learning to reach for discernment, Virgo word, versus judgment, which is sometimes a Piscean word. Look at anybody in the consensus state caught up in religion. How judgmental are they? Judgment doesn't just belong in the Pisces realm. You can find it in Virgo. You can find conditioned societal judgments in Capricorn 10th house. Self-improvement efforts are what we need. Physical, emotional, mental, spiritual. What I will call the SMEP. All over the place, every single level. Physical, emotional, mental, spiritual. Just making the effort and making the effort and making the effort. And as Jeffrey Green would teach many times, Source isn't looking for the outcome. Source is interested in our intent. I really do want to be healthier. And I really do want to make a better effort to release excess weight, to eat better, to, just whatever I need to do to improve upon myself. I really want to make an effort to not criticize myself so much when I'm clumsy and I trip over the rug, like I do about 3 times a week. If we can not react and just go, I see the rug, I see myself working and moving smoothly, firmly on the ground. Source is interested in the effort. The lesson is in the effort, not the results. And then, of course, one of the really strong archetypes of Virgo 6th house and Mercury is learning to be of service to another. That is coming from Leo and moving towards the equality lessons of Libra. And so it's learning how to be of service to another as an individual and learning to be of service to the whole, to the greater good of any group that we might be a part of, to humans on planet Earth. It will lead us into what we will call devotion. But where we have to be careful is the distortions of that, again, the sadomasochism of ending up in self-sacrifice. And so service to another still has healthy boundaries. Doesn't require us to sacrifice ourselves all over the place. So wherever you have Neptune in Pisces, you're seeing where the manifestation of disillusionment, depression, things not working, feeling stuck in some type of void. And go to the opposite house where you have Virgo. That is where you need to make the effort through the retrograde cycle. That is where you need to apply a daily effort. That's where you need to apply forgiveness. That's where you need to learn how to be discerning. That's where you need to work on self-improvement. That's where you need to work on your service. Virgo is ultimately recognizing what our karma yoga, spiritual yoga, highest and best work is to self-improve. And so wherever that Virgo house is, there's going to be some clues there to the spiritual yoga that you're meant to do on planet Earth. So now let me briefly just go through aspects. Of course, here's the Sun, Neptune as a planetary pair again. You see we go from conjunction to conjunction, annual cycle. In red is where Sun is having aspects to Neptune while it is retrograde. The highlight of any planetary retrograde is its aspect to the Sun, conjunctions with Mercury, Venus, oppositions with Mars through Pluto. This opposition again, end of August, 8.5 degrees Virgo Pisces. Virgo, Sun in Virgo, shining the light of day on reality and the creative efforts we need to be making to reconnect with Source, to feel inspired. You can look at it as simply as Pisces evolution to reconnect with Source. It's just being able to find something that has value and meaning to us. Where's that Virgo house? What would give you value and meaning? Sun in Virgo in general, making the effort in the world. And again, when we get to that opposition, is your cup half empty or your cup half full? Are you going to be just tearing yourself apart here with this polarity of Sun Neptune? Or are you going to learn how to be gentle with yourself as you're in this process of perfecting and healing and evolving and searching for Source? Show me the way, Source. Show me the way. Show me the way. Show me the way. Just make that your mantra and it'll be revealed. Now, we also have Mercury having an opposition to Neptune, August 12th, but we're just coming off of this last Mercury retrograde in Gemini, okay, where it's been making 3 waxing squares to Neptune, implementing new thought patterns into new beliefs. Beliefs are nothing more than conditioned thoughts. Mercury retrograde shakes up the conditioned thoughts and allows us to create new ones. Gemini, let that one go, move into a new one. Let that one go, move into a new one. Flip the switch with the Gemini twins, as I like to say. When we get to the opposition, we've got to have that Virgo discrimination and discernment. Neptune retrograde in Pisces Neptune retrograde in Pisces, correct, points to Mercury as ruler of Virgo. And we have to have some application of the deeper meanings of what's taking place in our life with communications, inner, outer, with what we're shedding and letting go, and where we need to utilize Mercury with that application again of effort. Venus. Venus is going to have a retrograde cycle, but it only makes one waxing in conjunct to Neptune, and it has an opposition to Neptune through its retrograde cycle when Venus goes through Virgo after its retrograde cycle in Leo. Venus will go retrograde at almost 1 degree Virgo, July 25th. So there's going to be a little Venus Virgo flavor before it retrogrades back into What About Me, Leo. We're going to be needing to discern healthy self-love and connection to Source. Not sacrificing ourselves till we're exhausted. Healthy boundaries, healthy self-love, healthy reconnecting to Source. Learning healthy giving and receiving with others in love. Releasing any of those de facto God-Goddess projections. One of the things with Neptune in Pisces and the 12th house is that we'll project idealism onto the partner. We'll want them to quote unquote save us. We will make them into our substitute for Source energy. Then when we do that, we are guaranteed disillusionment. And Neptune having an opposition, Venus having an opposition to Neptune, this could be one of the things going on. Oh my gosh, my partner's not perfect. They're going to be saying the same thing about us. So can we have self-forgiveness and forgiveness of others? Mars is going to have an opposition with Neptune. Here we're moving into a 2-year cycle around the zodiac. You see the conjunctions. And so Mars is going to have waxing trine in conjunct to Neptune and then its opposition in October. Mars is going to be in Cancer, Leo, Virgo. So we're going to be working to clarify that desire nature and building the momentum to create it. And because it's in opposition, it's quite possible there will be some old desires we need to release, no longer serving our soul. Neptune retrograde, Pisces. And we're going to have to really make some effort to balance ourselves with others. Oppositions, giving and receiving. Throwing off what no longer works. Oppositions. Mars, it is going to ask us to do some service to the greater whole in our personal world. Now that greater whole may be, some of us may be on the selfish end, and we have to learn to give in our intimate relationships. Some of us selfless, we're going to have to learn healthy boundaries. So the service to the greater whole, it could be to our intimate other in some way. It could be to our family. It could be to coworkers, friends. It might be to the group on some level as well. Now, one more, guess what? Jupiter has an opposition to Neptune as well. It's only going to have one opposition. They don't meet 3 times. You can see that they last had their conjunctions in 2009 in the latter degrees of Aquarius. They will have, I think Jupiter is a 13-year cycle with Neptune. They'll have another conjunction in 2022. So the one opposition is going to be September 17th. That's the date that Saturn, by the way, goes back into Sagittarius. They're going to meet at about 8 degrees Virgo Pisces. So Jupiter-Neptune is a planetary pair. It's going to be the evolution of our conscious Jupiter and unconscious Neptune beliefs. We're going to have a discernment with our beliefs. Jupiter, when it gets ready to go into a Virgo, which I think it does August 11th for the next year, this is going to be really putting a discerning eye into what our beliefs are and looking at all the conditioning factors, looking at those distortions of sadomasochism. Well, it's going to get a little hit on that when it has the opposition to Neptune retrograde, and we're going to be at a choice point of self-criticism or self-love, cup half empty or cup half full. So we're going to really be having to look at all the avoidance paths we have versus the healthy path for us as an individual level. So let me recap this for you. 5 planets make oppositions to Neptune during this retrograde cycle. You want some energy to go towards Virgo effort, Virgo diet, exercise, and rest, Virgo discernment, Virgo self-love, Virgo gentleness. Here's the dates, 2 months between August 12th and October 16th. Mercury, Sun, Jupiter, Mars, Venus. Between 7 and 9 degrees Virgo, Pisces. There's those 3 degrees of Neptune's retrograde cycle. So keywords, judgment versus discernment. Criticism versus endearment or self-love with ourself and others. The cup half empty or the cup half full. Walking the spiritual path through planet Earth, on planet Earth, with planet Earth. Again, those 5 planets making oppositions to Neptune are really going to be triggering and showing us and pointing towards the way to reconnect to source energy. Now, I do want to point out that after Neptune's retrograde cycle, remember Neptune turns direct November 18th, 2015 at 7 degrees 1 minute Pisces. So we're going to move into this fall and into 2016. Saturn making 3 last quarter squares to Neptune. And this is really going to be shedding old reality. Jeffrey's keywords for Saturn-Neptune as a planetary pair, the divine disconnect, where form, Saturn, has to surrender to energy, Neptune. You can see they last had conjunctions in 1989 in Capricorn. We really wanted to move into form. As we had the Saturn-Neptune oppositions in 06-07, Saturn-Leo, Neptune in Aquarius. This was recognizing quantum physics, if you can remember that being such a buzzword back then, and where we are running up against the limits of what we can manifest. And when we don't like the form, how do we go into then looking at deeper forms of energy to redo the forms? This is right before the meltdown when Pluto went into Capricorn 2008. And so we've been getting a handle on what we can create, what we can't create. And now, as we have last quarter squares, crises in consciousness, Sag to Pisces, it really is surrendering back to source. I will, my will, divine will. Show me the truth on the deepest levels possible, source. Go review my collective slides from earlier. Teach yourself about how we have financial policies in the world. Educate yourself, educate others. There's nothing more powerful than the masses. On a personal level, surrender to your own personal truths. What truths are you needing to shed and release? Now, the next 2 last quarter squares, second and third one, are both going to be when Neptune's retrograde next year. This is going to be important aspects next year. Stay tuned more on this with next year's Neptune retrograde in Pisces class. But for now, just really recognize that you're having to surrender old, false, conditioned beliefs, not just around religion and spirituality, but old, false, conditioned beliefs around anything, around money, around resources, around relationships, around work and career, Saturn, around anything and everything that you've got a conditioned thought pattern running that's been condensed into a belief. So you could be working on the tidbits of becoming aware of this when Neptune goes direct, and then you'll be setting yourself up to become fully conscious of it during the next Neptune retrograde cycle a year from now, and really be walking your talk. I would, by the way, suggest for those of you who are participating in this webinar, when Neptune goes direct, or even at the Sun-Neptune opposition, review this webinar. You'll have another wave of understandings come along for you to recognize. Leroy,
Kim?
yes?
Yeah, on that note, I just wanted to report back to you about the Section 3 most recent postings there. Yeah, we did that Uranus, Pluto, and the nodal axis.
Did it go into Section 3?
It did indeed. It's a forecasting webinar, so we put it in the forecasting section. We also have, recent updates are the Yod Finger of God by Maurice Fernandez, Jupiter retrograde in Leo, of course, Uranus retrograde in Aries, our Jupiter series. So, yeah, we're consistently upgrading Section 3 of the Astro Library.
So Section 3, you can go review my 2013 lectures with Robert Gover on time and money, past, present, future, 2 different webinars. And you
Mm-hmm.
can review the March webinar with Uranus making the 7th waxing square to Pluto in Capricorn moving forward. And between those
Mm-hmm.
3 webinars, you can get a good review astrologically of what's happening on from a fiscal perspective related to what I've just said earlier.
Absolutely. Then you talk about value, though. I've also, posted all of Jeff Green's Pluto School, the relationship, synastry, sexuality composite, his segment 2 of his Pluto School in section 3 of the Astro Library. So
Oh,
that's about a $500 value, but
uh-huh.
people are going to do what they're going to do. But I think I would subscribe to section 3 if I was an Astro listener out there wanting to expand my consciousness and with EA.
Thank you. And Jeffrey Wolf Green's segment 1, this is 2004 Boulder, the last time we taught them. His segment 1 ended up in section 2, correct? Pretty sure, because that's some of the EA basics. And so, yes, there's some tidbits for you on continuing your studies. So what I'd like to do next, if you guys will allow me, please, in humoring me, relative to the busyness of my weekend, what I'd like to do now is, instead of going through and reading all of these 12 houses, I'd just like to give you a little bit of overview of what I did. I've taken Neptune retrograde in Pisces through each of the 12 houses. I tried to really describe some of the distortions that would be going on, and I tried to give a couple of words in what the Virgo polarity would be. But then I also put in some of the health and wellness. Neptune, and this will be on the last slide, Neptune Pisces 12th house. Neptune rules the immune system, it rules the endocrine system, it rules the lymphatic system, and so Neptune has a lot to do with health and wellness. Again, the Virgo Pisces polarity, the 6th 12th polarity, have a lot to do with it. Your 6th house cusp will show where there's a manifestations of distortions, illnesses, diseases, and the 12th house cusp will be the spiritual causal factor behind the manifestation. So the Neptune Pisces house cusp will be the causal factor, even though I'm going to list some of the actual stuff that's going on here. And I'm just going to just kind of briefly go through all 12 of them. And notice my new glyphs of the 12 houses. I just got that done. So as I'm working with webinars, I get to put that in now. And so I just tried, because Neptune is, I think it's 2011 to 2025, wasn't it? So we're talking a 14-year transit through the sign of Pisces, and therefore more or less, give or take a few years, through each of the houses. So you could see some Neptunian manifestations with these houses. So it's going to give you some area of where you are also going to want to be applying some of the Virgo efforts with diet, exercise, and rest, and some of the meditative efforts in really visualizing those orbs of your matrix, as we say in my energetic world, or those organs and tissues and areas of the body that you're going to go through from a healing perspective. And so you can, again, you can apply that Virgo connection with, or excuse me, the Pisces connection with Source in a meditative, spiritual, prayer way, energizing these areas, healing. And it's not a complete list. I kind of just I had to bullet point it down for everybody. All right. And then you can also apply the Virgo polarity of really making the effort. So how do I work with healing physically? How do I work with healing emotionally? How do I work with it mentally? And how do I work with it spiritually? And so let me finish up here with the last two slides for you. Taking our time to go through. And then I will ask if there are possibly any questions that anybody may have as we're finishing up here. Any questions that you might have, you are more than welcome to raise your hand on the message board.
And of course, you'll have to be mic'd with earbuds or a USB headset of some sort.
And then as I move into our final slide, I'd like to remind you that, as Leroy said earlier, with the same codes, you can join us Wednesday night class for Chiron Retrograde in Pisces. And then, of course, next month we're going to move into the Venus retrograde cycle, the Uranus one. And then in August, we're going to look at a two-class series. The Venus is standalone on its own. Uranus is standalone on its own. August, we'll have a two-part series on Jupiter and Virgo. Now we're going to have a free Mercury retrograde again. And as we move into fall and winter, I've decided that I'm going to teach a webinar series on the chakras. I kind of, as I was prepping for Neptune, I kind of went, I've never really taught standalone public webinars on health and wellness via evolutionary astrology. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to start with the chakra series.
Kim?
Yes.
Let's take a question from Peter. I'm pretty sure he's mic'd. Unmute him. There you go. Go ahead, Peter.
Hi, Kim.
Hi, Peter.
Just a quick question in regards to aspects. Is there a difference in between an aspect between Neptune direct and Neptune retrograde, for example, to the nodes?
Yes, if Neptune retrograde is making an aspect, it's going to be pushing whatever planetary aspect you're looking at to review, to throw off the past. Just like Neptune itself turning retrograde in Pisces is asking us to throw off things relative to whatever house it's in. As it makes Neptune retrograde makes aspects to planets, that planet has to throw off the past. So if it's making an aspect to the nodal axis, the south node has to throw off things from the past in regards to the ego. And the north node will have to throw off how it's trying to move forward and really kind of review that and perhaps learn a new way to move forward. And if Neptune is going direct, when it's back to that 7-degree mark, for instance, and that's a tighter aspect to another planet, because again, we're only talking 3 degrees here, so Neptune retrograde and Neptune direct can both make aspects to the same planet. But when it makes the aspect, and chances are 3 times with the retrograde, okay, Neptune direct making the aspect is going to push it forward. Neptune retrograde pushes the review, back up, throw off. Neptune direct is the energy to push forward in the new directions after the retrograde. So, for instance, the nodal axis, the south node, when it lets go of old egoic stuff, there's a metamorphosis that will happen to the south node. The south node will move out of some of its distortions into more natural expressions. And the north node will get a little extra push on really being able to move forward in new ways. Really create a new sense of ego identification on deep spiritual levels, Neptune direct. Helpful?
Awesome. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Anybody else? All right then. Well, we've gotten pretty good with the 2 hours. Last call. Anybody else in any questions on this Neptune retrograde? And if not, I'm really wishing all of you the ability to take this information. You'll have the PDF power slides and really, allow yourself some meditative time on this and allow that deeper mind to really reflect and understand where it is you're trying to release and reconnect with Source. All right, I thank all of you for your desire to study with me and Leroy, and I'll see you Wednesday for Chiron retrograde in Pisces. Good night, everyone.